I've been running into this a lot, especially with a lot of white knights accusing me of making generalizations. There's nothing wrong with making a generalization. In fact, making a generalization is required when you're looking at large groups. You simply can't look at individuals when you're talking about millions and billions of people. So you have people who are brought up believing that all generalizations are bad. You can't have any generalizations. If you generalize at all, you're committing a logical fallacy. You can make a generalization too quickly based on a very small sample, known as a hasty generalization, or more commonly known as jumping to conclusions. However, there are valid generalizations when you have proof and when you're dealing with large numbers. Statistics is math, and a lot of people aren't good at math, or they go to college and they get these liberal arts degrees. They've never had to take a statistics class. So I'm going to give you a crash course in college level statistics and how the margin of error is calculated so that you know what the fuck it's talking about. It's really not that complicated. So the main thing I get accused of is I'm making generalizations about women and MGTOW in general, talking about female nature and female hypergamy, and oh, it's a generalization. Basically, it's the Nawalt argument without using Nawalt. They've basically gotten wise. They stopped using the actual Nawalt phrase, or not all women are like that. They've dressed it up. Now their new thing is, oh, you're making generalizations, you're committing a logical fallacy, but really it's just a Nawalt argument all over again. So let's talk about hypergamy. Now, hypergamy in the dictionary is basically defined as when a woman tries to date or marry higher than her current class. Essentially, the way MGTOW used this is that women are always looking for a bigger, better deal. However, when you really break hypergamy down, it is the culmination of three attributes, which we can collectively term female nature. Women are selfish, they are opportunistic, and they are materialistic. Now, that sounds harsh, but it's very demonstrably true, as numerous studies show, which I will cite a few in this video. Now, it doesn't mean that men are perfect. We have our own flaws and our own quirks of human nature. I'll talk about that in an upcoming video. But let's talk about what the elements of hypergamy are, namely selfishness, opportunism, and materialism, and let's see how the statistics, how studies and polls and surveys bear this out. So the easiest one to talk about is that women are attracted to a man's money. Now, there are women who actually admit having a man earn more money makes him more physically attractive, which makes no sense. How is someone more physically attractive because they have money? Money's just, it's a completely intangible thing other than maybe the clothes they're wearing. Now, I've used these polls in the past in another video, but I think they fit this video as well. So I'm going to link to an article from the Daily Mail called What Women Really Want, Money. Research finds women look for well-paid job first in partner. According to the poll, 64% said they want to find a husband bringing home more money than them, and that this has actually gone up since the 1940s. There was another poll from YouGov, which polled and found that 62% of women said their husbands earned more than them, with only 16% earning more than their husbands, and only 18% earning the same. And a very telling quote from the London survey found that 100% of the women in the survey, all of them wanted a man who made as much money or more money than them. None wanted to marry a man that earned less. Now, if you were to poll men, do you think you would find that men even give one shit about how much a woman earns? And yet it's number one with a woman by a huge margin. 64% of women who basically won't marry a man unless he makes more money than them, compared to statistics in the teens of women who make as much or more than their husbands. And it really shows that women are materialistic. That's what they look for. It's the number one thing they look for. And this doesn't mean they're bad. I'll talk about that in another video, about how these instincts came about. It all really comes down to reproduction. There's no morality in it. It's about survival and reproduction. So we've proved that females are materialistic, but can we prove that they're more opportunistic? Well, yes we can. An article from the website Your Tango called Women More Likely to Cheat Than Men According to Science states that according to a poll, 9% of men would cheat if they found a woman that was better than their current partner. 25% of women would cheat. So we have a huge disparity once again. Now the article also makes an interesting point that women 35 to 40 are most likely to dabble in infidelity because they want a baby. So if you're dating a woman who says she doesn't want kids, or you come to an agreement that you don't want kids, once her biological clock is screaming, once she hits her mid-30s, early 40s, and she realizes that that window is closing, she may cheat on you just to get pregnant. According to this study, they are the most likely to commit adultery or infidelity because they want a baby. So just be careful, guys. If you have these girlfriends and you're like, oh, she's in the wall, we don't even want kids. Yeah, you be careful. When she hits her mid-30s and her biological clock starts going off, she's going to want kids. And if you stick to your guns and say, I don't want kids, she may just cheat on you in order to get kids. Also keep in mind that in this survey, the 9 versus 25% were people who said they would definitely cheat. So 9% of men would definitely cheat if they found a better partner than their current one. 25% of women would definitely cheat. So that doesn't mean that it's a minority, that the other 75% of women would definitely not cheat. They probably would cheat too. The article doesn't go into the actual nuts and bolts of the survey, it just talks about the results. But it's very telling that men, 9%, women, 25%. So we've now proven that women are not only materialistic, but also opportunistic. But are women more selfish? This one's a little bit more hard to pin down. We have to talk about morality. Now again, like I said, there's no morality in nature, there's only survival. However, in society, we judge certain things as either moral or immoral. And it's very telling that men and women experience and judge morality in different ways. I'm going to link to 3 articles. 2 are from Psychology Today and 1 is from Santa Clara University, talking about the differences between how men and women perceive justice and morals. According to these articles, and according to all these experiments and polls and all this other stuff, all this research, I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts because it's really extensive. But basically, men care about justice in a more broad sense, like societal justice, whereas women are more apt to discard justice in order to benefit themselves and their loved ones. So what's interesting is these female researchers are trying to redefine justice because previous research showed that men are much more moral when you look at universal justice and things like that. And of course, feminists didn't like that. So they're trying to redefine what justice is from a universal concept to talking about contextual compassion. So their idea is, okay, yeah, men care about justice, but women are more compassionate. So it's not that men are more moral, it's that, you know, it's all different. Well, not really. You can't run a society based on contextual justice, where it's okay to commit crimes over here as long as the parties are this and this. I mean, this is the double standards that people complain about. This is why women don't give a shit about double standards. This is also why when you point out the double standards of feminism, women don't care. Even like anti-feminist women or neutral women who aren't feminists, if you talk about the double standards of feminism, it doesn't really move them. Women don't think of justice in that way. They don't care about a universal standard. Does that make women more selfish? Absolutely. It depends on how you judge morality. But when you look at just the way they think, the way they perceive morality, the fact that they're more likely to steal if they perceive that they need the money more than you. And of course, a woman is always going to have her own group preference. She's always going to perceive that she needs money. And thus, if you have money, she'll have no problems taking it, and she will not lose any sleep at night. She deserves that money because she's a woman, because you have it, and because she needs it more than you. And it's not immoral for her to take it because vagina. Essentially, that's really what it comes down to. That's how women process morals. Does it make them more selfish? Yes. They're more likely to do all sorts of crime if they can justify it. Even if you throw out morality, just talk about practicalities. Again, if you can't base a society on that kind of moral code, where people are allowed to commit crimes against each other as long as they perceive that they needed your property more than you did. I mean, just imagine that. Imagine if people could just go around stealing and robbing people because they needed the money. Okay, I'm going to include a link from Penn State talking about sampling. And the really important part of this page is it's talking about the margin of error. So when you're creating a survey or a poll or something to do kind of a general query, you want the sample to be representative of the larger population. If the sample is representative of the population, and depending on the size of the sample, you can actually have what's called a margin of error. The bigger the sample, the smaller the margin of error. And as long as it's representative, it'll be very accurate. Now there's a website called 538.com, which actually ranks polling institutions. And I want to use this just because you can actually see if this measures reality. That's really the litmus test of whether something is a faulty generalization or a valid generalization, is does it reflect reality? If you make a generalization about a population and it doesn't reflect reality, how do you measure that? Well, one of the easiest ways to measure that is have a vote. Now, not everyone votes, but the people who do vote usually represent the overall population. Companies spend a lot of money doing samples, doing polls during presidential elections and congressional elections to kind of estimate what's going to happen during the election before the election even happens. And one of the gold standard polling companies is Public Policy Polling. And if you go to the Daily Cost, they actually talk about the polling methodology. So Public Policy Polling randomly samples people based on voter profiles, and then they filter those samples through models which attempt to replicate the population. So for example, because more women stay at home, they're more likely to answer the phone. The husband won't be home to answer the phone to take a poll. More women answer the phone, thus more women respond to the polls. However, that's not indicative of the population. If women would be overrepresented. So in order to fit the general population after the poll is conducted, they run the respondents through a model and actually eliminate a lot of female participants in order to mirror the actual population to make the poll more accurate and indicative of the population. This just goes into how to properly conduct a poll and why generalizations aren't always bad as long as they reflect reality and the overall population they're sampling from. The reason why this video exists is I'm just really tired of people accusing me of making logical fallacies based on generalizations. These are not logical fallacies. If they were logical fallacies, I would be using outliers to make broad generalizations about a larger population that doesn't fit the outliers. So for example, if I wanted to make a generalization about women, but I only sampled lesbians, and I found that 100% of lesbians aren't attracted to men, therefore women aren't attracted to men, and all women are lesbians. That would be stupid. That would be a faulty generalization because the LGBT community is only about 5% of the population. However, when 60+% fit the description, when 80% plus fit the description, when you have overwhelming statistics, that's a completely different story. To call that a faulty generalization is just stupid. It just means you are against generalizations, period. And the problem is with these critics who accuse me of making generalizations is they're creating an impossible standard. They're saying that if I make any generalization about women using any size sample that isn't 100% of women, then I'm making a generalization and it's incorrect. In order to prove things like female hypergamy, female selfishness, female materialism, female opportunism, I need to poll each and every woman in the entire world. And if I don't poll each and every woman in the entire world, then I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm making a logical fallacy, which is completely stupid. Not only does nobody have the resources to do that, it's a completely impossible standard, it's also completely unnecessary. You can calculate the margin of error. When you're talking about plus or minus 5 or 10% based on a sample size, and you say that 100% of women of a survey, 100% of women did not want to marry a man that made less than them. Even if there's a 10% margin of error, you're talking about at least 90%. When 90% plus of a population fit to a certain characteristic, that's basically universal of the population. There may be some outliers. There's always a few outliers, completely random. Maybe they had brain damage or something like that. I don't know. Maybe they're hermaphrodites. But the point is, when you have statistics that high, when the population conforms that much to a universal concept, that is not a faulty generalization. That is not a hasty generalization. It is a generalization because generalizations are required when dealing with large numbers. It's the basis of statistics. You learned something today. You're going to learn a new word called inferential statistics. The definition of inferential statistics, they're consisting of generalizing from samples to population, performing estimation and hypothesis test, determining relationship among variables, and making predictions. This is the basis of things like weather prediction, economic prediction, drug side effect prediction. I mean, this is so much of our world relies on using inferential statistics. As long as they're tested, as long as there's evidence behind them, they're not faulty. There's no logical fallacy being committed. So now that I've made this video, if I get accused of making generalizations, I'm just going to link to this video. I'm not even going to engage you anymore because you clearly don't know what the hell you're talking about. I understand you learned what a logical fallacy was on Wikipedia and you just use it in all your little internet arguments. You're not using it correctly. Generalizations in and of themselves are not a logical fallacy, as long as they're supported, as long as they represent a majority of a population, or a vast majority of the population, even better. You can't say that something that represents at least 60% of a population is a faulty generalization. That's fucking stupid. Anyway, so that's this video. I hope you learned something. This is a turd-flinging monkey. I'll see you next time.